Our first meeting was incidental, a brief encounter during a routine staff briefing. She, 32 years old and exuding a collegiate charm, was a stark contrast to the usual staff. There was an air of academia about her, a lingering aura of her recent college days. It was intriguing how she seamlessly transitioned from the world of academia into our corporate microcosm. As her mentor, I found myself in a role that was as new to me as the job was to her. Guiding her through the labyrinth of office politics and procedural nuances was a responsibility I took seriously. Our interactions were initially professional, marked by a mutual respect and an ever-growing appreciation of each other's skills and qualities. But as time marched on, those meetings at the office began to take on a different hue. We discovered shared interests, a similar sense of humor, and an easy camaraderie that extended beyond the walls of I-35. Coffee breaks became longer, and work discussions seamlessly transitioned into personal conversations. I learned about her college days, her adventures, and her dreams. She was a vibrant tapestry of experiences and aspirations. Meanwhile, my life outside of work was a quiet routine, marked by the usual social gatherings and a small circle of friends. Her entrance into my life brought a refreshing change, a new perspective that challenged and intrigued me. I found myself looking forward to our interactions, anticipating the bright smile and the intelligent conversation that awaited me each day at work. Our bond strengthened over shared projects and work challenges. There was a sense of teamwork that went beyond the usual colleague camaraderie. We celebrated small victories together and supported each other through the inevitable setbacks. It was during one such celebration, a simple dinner after a successful project completion, that I realized the depth of my feelings for her. The realization came as a gentle wave, not a sudden jolt. It was an understanding that what we had was special, unique in its form and essence. The friendship that had blossomed in the confines of I-35 had unknowingly paved the way for something deeper, something more profound. As months turned into a year, our relationship evolved, cautiously at first, as we navigated the delicate balance between professional and personal. But the heart knows no bounds and our connection deepened, unfettered by the constraints of office walls. We found solace, understanding, and a deep-seated respect for each other. Our story truly began in those early days at I-35, in the midst of mundane routines and office chatter. Little did we know that those initial innocent interactions would lay the foundation for a journey that would test us in ways we never imagined. It was a beginning that was humble yet significant, marking the start of a shared path filled with love, challenges, and the intertwining of two lives in a bond that would eventually face the ultimate test. My wife, who had since transitioned from a carefree student to a responsible adult, was taken aback by her friend's sudden reappearance. The news of her friend's engagement was as surprising as it was unsettling. It stirred in my wife a complex mixture of emotions: joy for her friend's happiness, nostalgia for their shared past, and an underlying sense of disbelief. How had the wild spirit she once knew, the partner in countless college escapades, decided to settle down? As the friend rekindled her relationship with my wife, I observed a subtle change in her. There was a renewed vigor, a spark that I hadn't seen since our early days at I-35. She recounted tales of their college adventures with a twinkle in her eye, painting vivid pictures of their youthful exploits. It was a window into a part of her life I had only heard about in fragments, a life filled with freedom and reckless abandon. Despite her initial reservations, my wife found herself drawn back into the orbit of her college friend. The promise of revisiting her youth, even if just vicariously through her friend's engagement celebrations, was enticing. It was a chance to momentarily step away from the responsibilities that now defined her life. As her husband, I watched this development with a mix of emotions. On the one hand, I was happy to see her reignite a part of her personality that had been subdued by adult life. On the other, there was a growing concern. The college friend, with her impending nuptials, represented a world my wife had left behind. A world of unbridled partying and risks that seemed incompatible with the life we had built together. Our shared understanding as a couple was tested during this period. We had always been candid about our pasts, but this reconnection brought a new dynamic to our relationship. The agreement was clear and had been set early in our marriage. Certain aspects of her past, including the intimate nature of her friendship with this woman, would remain in the past, especially given the depth of their previous escapades. Yet, as the engagement party drew closer, I couldn't shake off a sense of foreboding. There was an unspoken fear that the reemergence of her college friend might awaken in my wife a longing for a life she had willingly left behind. It was a test of trust and understanding, a delicate balance between respecting her autonomy and expressing my concerns. The day was like any other until I came home and stumbled upon what seemed like a discarded postcard next to my bag. It was only out of a flicker of curiosity that I decided to inspect it. Wrapped in plastic, it appeared innocuous at first, but as I read through, I realized it was an invitation to a bachelor party happening that very night at a men's strip club in the city. The discovery sent a jolt through me, a mix of surprise and apprehension. This invitation was not just any piece of paper. It symbolized a world that my wife and I had agreed she would no longer be a part of. It represented a breach of the trust and understanding that we had built over the years. The immediate surge of emotions was overwhelming confusion, betrayal, and a need to understand why. Driven by a concoction of concern and disbelief, I made an impulsive decision to go to the strip club. I had to see for myself to understand what was happening. It wasn't just about trust. It was about protecting our relationship from the ghosts of her past that seemed to be resurfacing. Upon arriving at the club, I was out of my element, a stranger in a world of nighttime revelry and abandon. My sole focus was to find my wife to get answers. I began asking around, inquiring about the wives and brides in attendance. It felt surreal, almost as if I was a character in a movie, trying to piece together a puzzle in a setting that was completely alien to me. Finally, a breakthrough came when I learned from one of the women that my wife had left the party with two men. The information struck me like a physical blow. I was torn between denial and the dawning realization that something was amiss. Desperation took over as I pressed for more details, eventually learning the name of the hotel where they had gone. The journey to the hotel was a blur, a tumult of emotions raging within me. I called my wife's phone repeatedly, only to be met with the cold silence of unanswered calls. Upon reaching the hotel, I was confronted with yet another obstacle. The receptionist refused to divulge any information about the room. It was in this state of mounting despair and frustration that I saw her emerge from the elevator, accompanied by a man. The sight was like a dagger to my heart. Her expression upon seeing me was a mix of shock and guilt. The raw emotion on her face, the tears streaming uncontrollably, spoke volumes. The confrontation that unfolded in the hotel lobby was charged with an intensity that neither of us had ever experienced in our relationship. There in a public space, our private anguish was laid bare. My wife's face, a canvas of shock and regret, mirrored my own feelings of betrayal and disbelief. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and desperate explanations. I asked her the question that was burning inside me: what happened? Her response was a mix of silence and stuttered half-answers. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words seemed to fail her. The enormity of the situation seemed to have rendered her speechless, her usual eloquence lost in the tide of her emotions. In a moment of overwhelming frustration, I pressed for details, but she remained unable to articulate a response. Instead, she grasped my hand, a silent plea for understanding, and we began to walk away from the chaos of the hotel. As we exited, her confession came in a flood of tears and broken sentences. She admitted to making a terrible mistake by attending the party and asked if we could go home to talk. The drive home was a journey through a landscape of confusion and hurt. She sat beside me, a shell of the person I thought I knew, lost in her own world of regret. At home, the floodgates opened, and she confessed everything. The night had started as a simple reunion, a harmless celebration, but it had spiraled into something she hadn't anticipated. Her words painted a picture of a night filled with old habits and dangerous flirtations. She insisted that nothing physical had happened, but the emotional betrayal was already too deep. She revealed that the connection with the man from the hotel was innocent, a misguided attempt to relive her youth. But the damage was done. Following the night of the revelation, my wife moved to her brother's house, a physical manifestation of the chasm that had formed between us. This separation was more than just geographical. It represented the profound emotional distance that had emerged from the revelations of that fateful night. The home we had built together, once a haven of love and comfort, now stood as a stark reminder of the trust that had been shattered. During this time, my wife's attempts to reach out and reconcile were met with my unwavering resolve. The hurt and betrayal I felt were too deep, the broken trust too significant to simply sweep under the rug. Each phone call, each message from her, was a piercing reminder of the chasm that now lay between us. The narrative in this chapter also explores the struggle to maintain a semblance of normalcy in the midst of this personal turmoil. The routines of work and daily life continued, but beneath the surface, there was a constant battle with a gamut of emotions: anger, sadness, disbelief, and a lingering sense of loss. As the days turned into weeks, the initial shock gradually gave way to a painful acceptance. The realization that our marriage, once a source of strength and happiness, had been irrevocably altered was a bitter pill to swallow. The chapter reflects on the complexities of healing from such a deep emotional wound, the process of coming to terms with the end of a relationship, and the daunting task of envisioning a life that diverges from the shared path once envisioned with a partner. As the dust settled on the tumultuous events that had unfolded, I found myself grappling with a new reality. The space that once echoed with shared laughter and love was now a silent witness to the chasm between us. My wife, now living at her brother's, was physically distant, yet her presence was felt in every corner of our once shared home. During these days, I oscillated between moments of profound sadness and flashes of anger. The ringing phone flashing her name was a constant reminder of the life we had and the uncertainty that now lay ahead. Each call from her was like reopening a wound that had barely begun to heal. She wanted to talk, to explain, to find a way back to us. But I was lost in a sea of betrayal and hurt. The house felt emptier than ever. I would often find myself sitting in our living room, staring at the spaces she once occupied. Memories of our time together would play in my mind like a bittersweet movie, the joyous moments now tinged with the pain of our current situation. Her favorite mug still sat on the shelf, her books still lined our bookcase, and her scent still lingered, making it impossible to forget the bond we once shared. Friends and family, who had celebrated our union, now treaded cautiously around the subject of our separation. Their well-intentioned words of comfort often felt like salt in an open wound. They too were struggling to make sense of how our seemingly perfect relationship had reached this point of disrepair. The solitude of the nights was the hardest. The quietness of the house amplified the turmoil within me. I would often find myself reaching for my phone, tempted to call her, to hear her voice, to pretend even for a moment that things were back to normal. But the harsh reality of her betrayal would always pull me back, a stark reminder of the trust that had been broken. In quieter moments, I pondered over the remnants of our relationship. Could the fissures be mended? Was there a path back to what we had? Or had the foundation of our marriage been irrevocably damaged? These questions haunted my thoughts, offering no easy answers, only a reflection of the complexity of human emotions and relationships. As the weeks turned into months, the initial shock and turmoil of our separation gave way to a period of deep introspection and reflection. This chapter chronicles my journey through this transformative phase, a time when the raw emotions began to settle, and the stark reality of our situation became clearer. In the solitude of our once shared home, I found myself confronting a myriad of emotions and unanswered questions. The silence of the empty rooms provided a backdrop for introspection, leading me to ponder the intricacies of love, trust, and the delicate nature of human relationships. I realized that while love forms the foundation of a marriage, it is trust that acts as its pillars, and once these pillars are shaken, the entire structure becomes vulnerable. During this time, I began to accept the painful truth that our marriage, as I had known it, was over. The realization was not immediate but rather a gradual awakening. It was a process marked by moments of sadness for what was lost, intertwined with a growing sense of clarity about the future. I reflected on the vows we had taken and the promises we had made. The breach of these vows by my wife was not just a momentary lapse. It was a decision that reflected deeper issues within our relationship and within herself. It became evident that the issues were not just about the incident at the hotel, but rather about the choices and actions leading up to that night. This period also brought a newfound understanding of self-love and respect. I recognized that forgiving my wife was essential for my healing, but forgiveness did not necessarily mean reconciliation. It meant releasing the anger and bitterness, not for her sake, but for my own peace of mind. As I journeyed through this labyrinth of emotions, I also grappled with the concept of personal freedom within a marriage. I realized that while love binds two people together, it should not restrict their individual growth and happiness. This realization brought a sense of liberation, a release from the chains of a relationship that, in hindsight, may have been more confining than nurturing. Madison, the younger sister, was everything my wife wasn't. Single, carefree, and relentlessly pursuing her dream career, she had a magnetic presence that drew people to her. Her success on TikTok and her burgeoning social media presence only amplified the differences between the sisters. Despite these glaring contrasts, my wife never openly admitted to feeling overshadowed by Madison. However, her actions and occasional offhand comments revealed a different story. The chapter delves into the subtle, often unspoken dynamics that governed their relationship. There were times when my wife's demeanor would change noticeably after interactions with Madison. It was as if each encounter with her sister served as a reminder of her own unfulfilled aspirations and the choices she had made. The narrative also explores how these feelings of inadequacy and jealousy subtly influenced our marriage. My wife's inner turmoil began to manifest in our daily life, casting a shadow over our relationship. She would oscillate between expressing her love for Madison and harboring a silent resentment towards her sister's accomplishments and freedom. This undercurrent of envy reached a tipping point when Madison announced her engagement. The news, while a happy occasion on the surface, stirred a whirlpool of emotions within my wife. The engagement symbolized everything Madison had, and my wife felt she lacked the excitement of new love, the thrill of an unwritten future, and the spotlight that inevitably came with it. As Madison's wedding preparations began, my wife found herself increasingly drawn into the vortex of her sister's life. She started to obsessively follow Madison's social media updates, her every post becoming a subject of scrutiny and comparison. This obsession was a stark contrast to the image she presented to the world, one of a supportive sister and a happily married woman. In the wake of the engagement, Madison, radiant and brimming with excitement, became the center of attention within the family and their social circle. Her happiness was palpable, infectious even, but it cast a shadow on my wife. Each wedding plan discussed, each bridal magazine left on our coffee table, seemed to deepen my wife's sense of inadequacy and longing. As her husband, I watched this internal struggle unfold. My wife oscillated between putting on a brave face and succumbing to her inner turmoil. In public, she was the supportive sister, sharing in Madison's joy, but in private, she revealed her true feelings. Her casual remarks about Madison's life choices often hid a deeper sentiment of resentment and unfulfilled desires. This period was marked by a subtle yet noticeable change in my wife's behavior. She became more withdrawn, often lost in thought, and increasingly fixated on Madison's social media presence. Her phone, once just a device for casual browsing, turned into a portal through which she vicariously lived out the excitement and freedom she perceived in Madison's life. The chapter also explores the dynamics of our marriage during this time. The joy and contentment that once defined our relationship began to wane, replaced by a sense of restlessness and dissatisfaction. Conversations about Madison and her wedding plans would often lead to awkward silences or forced enthusiasm from my wife. As Madison's wedding day approached, the tension reached a boiling point. A dinner invitation to meet Madison's fiancé and celebrate their engagement served as the backdrop for a pivotal moment in our story. The fiancé, charming and successful, seemed the perfect match for Madison, further highlighting the differences between the sisters' lives. After the dinner, the drive home was a silent journey, filled with unspoken thoughts and emotions. My wife's quiet demeanor was a stark contrast to her usual self. It was clear that seeing Madison's happiness and the love she shared with her fiancé had deeply affected her. The initial signs of trouble were subtle, yet in hindsight unmistakably ominous. My wife's behavior began to change in ways that were hard to ignore. She became increasingly distant, often lost in her thoughts, and her interactions with me grew more perfunctory. There were unexplained absences and late-night phone calls that she would hurriedly dismiss as inconsequential. But the truth was far from it. The unraveling began in earnest when I noticed a pattern in her behavior. She started to leave the house at odd hours, offering vague explanations about needing to clear her head or meet a friend. It was during one of these unexplained outings that the truth began to emerge. A chance discovery of a timestamp on our home security system revealed that her exits and returns were more frequent than she had let on. Confronted with this evidence, my wife initially tried to brush it off as harmless outings. But the persistence of my inquiries and the undeniable inconsistencies in her story led to the painful truth. She had been meeting Madison's fiancé in secret, an act that went beyond the boundaries of mere friendship or sisterly concern. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It was not just the act of betrayal that wounded me deeply, but the realization that our marriage had become a facade, masking a myriad of unspoken issues and resentments. My wife's actions were a reflection of her inner turmoil, her struggle with feelings of inadequacy, and her longing for a life that she felt had eluded her. In the days following the revelation, the finality of our situation became increasingly apparent. The home we shared, once filled with dreams and plans for the future, now felt like an empty shell, a stark reminder of what had been lost. The decision to divorce, though heart-wrenching, seemed the only path forward. It was a decision born not out of anger, but out of a profound sense of disillusionment and the need to preserve my own sense of self. As we navigated the painful process of separation, life continued in its unpredictable rhythm. In an ironic twist of fate, my relationship with Madison, born out of shared betrayal and heartache, began to evolve. Our interactions, initially centered around mutual support and understanding, slowly transformed into something deeper. In each other we found solace, a kindred spirit who understood the depths of the pain we were experiencing. This chapter is not just a story of endings, but also one of new beginnings. My burgeoning relationship with Madison was unexpected, yet it unfolded with a natural ease. We were two people who had been deeply hurt, finding comfort and understanding in each other's company. Our bond, strengthened by shared experiences and empathy, gradually blossomed into a romance. Meanwhile, my wife's path took a different turn. The realization that her actions had not only destroyed our marriage, but also her sister's engagement led her to a place of deep remorse and confusion. Her attempts to reach out to me to seek forgiveness were met with my firm resolve to move forward. The finality of our divorce marked an end to a chapter in both our lives. A chapter that had once been filled with love, but ended in pain and betrayal. The conclusion of this narrative is not just about the end of a marriage, or the beginning of a new relationship. It's about the profound transformations that occur within individuals when faced with life's unpredictability. My journey through the wreckage of a broken marriage to finding unexpected love with Madison taught me invaluable lessons about the complexity of human emotions, the fragility of trust, and the resilience of the human spirit. One of the key realizations that emerged from this journey is the understanding that love, in all its beauty and power, is not always enough to sustain a relationship. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild, and the scars of betrayal can run deeper than anticipated. My experience with my wife underscored the importance of honesty, communication, and mutual respect in a relationship. It highlighted the dangers of unaddressed emotions, and the destructive potential of envy and dissatisfaction. The evolution of my relationship with Madison also brought to light the capacity for healing and redemption. It showed that even in the aftermath of pain and loss, there can be new beginnings and opportunities for growth. Our connection, born from shared experiences of betrayal, blossomed into a source of strength and happiness, a reminder that life can take unexpected turns, leading to new paths and horizons. As for my ex-wife, her journey was a testament to the consequences of one's actions, and the difficult road to self-discovery and redemption. Her actions, driven by a complex interplay of emotions and unfulfilled desires, led to profound consequences that altered the course of multiple lives. Her story serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of allowing envy and dissatisfaction to dictate one's choices.